Next up on the OIS podcast, Dr. John Berdahl and Matthew Larson from Equinox take a pragmatic yet innovative approach to treating glaucoma. Let's listen in.
Good morning. This is Dr. Ehsan Sadri, board-certified ophthalmologist here in lovely Southern Cal. I have my two brothers here on. We're totally delighted to have them come on the OIS podcast this morning. Dr. John Berdahl, who's a good friend, and he's a very, very strong entrepreneur and just a wonderful human being. I'm delighted to have you on, John. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you for saying such kind words.
It's a pleasure. Our other guest here is Matt Larson, president and COO of Equinox, another good friend, local, and just a wonderful guy. How you doing, Matt?
Doing well, Ehsan. Yourself?
Good. We're in the middle of this COVID thing, and we were all talking about having kids doing Zoom quote meetings. How are you guys doing with this corona crisis?
Well, we're adapting, right? That's what we have to do, and it's happening to everyone. So we just gotta make sure we think differently and solve problems differently than we would have if we were all together in the same place.
How are you, John? How are you guys doing at home and with the company?
You know, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times because, there's a refocus on what is critical and what's essential, things that maybe got in our way, like HIPAA laws are gone. Maybe we get to spend more time with our family, but we don't get to put our hands in to work like we used to on people's eyes. And, that craft that's so beloved to us isn't there every day. But ultimately, philosophically, I think of this as, our generation's moment to own this crisis. And it's our responsibility. And this should be about humans helping humans be better humans. And, every day we try to wake up and do that.
That's terrific. There was a quote I was reading, I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy, not to digress, but to your exact point, it basically the notion is love your fate, or amor fati, which is a Roman sort of a Stoic philosophy, which this is our fate. Not just tolerate it, but love it. And you're nailing it. And I think that allows us to then pivot and do things that we're doing now with telehealth and telemedicine, as you're involved with. So, for those people that are not really familiar with both of you, I'd like to start with you, John. You're well known in the community. You're an absolute thought leader, a good friend, brother in arms. And I'm actually delighted to have you here. I know how busy you are, personally involved with so many different things. And for those of you who don't know him, he's Advanced Thompson Surgical Centers, and he's just a wonderful, wonderful human being and just an amazing savant. Tell us a little about yourself. Tell us what people should know, John.
I'm a small town kid. I grew up in a town of 500 people, and my family moved into the Dakotas 150 years ago when they were giving away land for free. And my family doesn't see opportunity that well, so I'm still in the Dakotas 150 years later. But, I grew up in a small town and went to a small college, came back, taught high school math for a year, coached girls basketball and boys baseball, and then went to medical school. I was actually going to be an optometrist, and my family optometrist suggested that I pursue a path in ophthalmology. I think he was trying to protect the noble profession of optometry from me. And it was kind of like a hand in a glove. And once I started doing ophthalmology, I had mentors like Terry Kim and Rand Allingham and Dick Lindstrom and Dave Harden and Tom Samuelson and my senior partner Vance, who just poured so much into me and gave me the confidence and pushed me to be, more than I ever thought that I could be. And so really it's been, like so many things, a lot of good people helping you be better than you thought you could be on your own. And so we've taken some swings on some entrepreneurial ideas, and so far that's gone really well. But I know in my core, I'm a I'm a doctor and an ophthalmologist, and what drives me more than anything else is delivering on the trust that patients and our team members put in us when they entrust us with something as special as their vision.
I love it. I'll go back to that at the end because I really want to dive in on that because you're very unique in the sense that you're not normally very busy, with the practice and doing all the stuff, taking care of patients where you are, but really also more importantly, you're really took a really, really courageous move and said, okay, you know what, I'm going to actually try this. And you pushed beyond the fear of failure, which is most people are afraid of. So we'll come back to you. Don't worry. Don't forget about that. So Matt, I want to talk to you a little bit, really introduce you to everybody. A lot of people know you from your old company. I know we and I talked about sort of all your clinical research background, also launching camera in Asia, specifically when you were living in Tokyo, in Japan. Tell us a little bit about your passions and how your background and how you're here now as president and CEO of Equinox.
Yeah, so I joined my first ophthalmology company about 15 years ago or so. It was AcuFocus, as you mentioned, and I started kind of on the bottom of the clinical team when it was a really small team overall early on in the project. I moved over to the commercial side when we started to sell the product in Japan. And then I actually, as you mentioned, moved to Tokyo and lived there for about 8 or 9 months while we were launching over there, and moved it to other geographies in Asia. And as I moved forward in the company, I also got a chance to kind of be the project lead for the second product, which was the IC8 IOL, and then got to launch that in Europe and Australia and a couple of other areas. And so I kind of fell in love with the startup world, the small company, and having to adapt quickly and solve problems and really get your hands dirty and dig in. And then I had met John about, 8 or 9 years ago. And when the opportunity came up to join him at Equinox, I jumped at it. And it's been an exciting, so far, 2 or 2.5 year ride with working closely with John on the Equinox project. And we're making good progress and hopefully changing the face of glaucoma.
That's wonderful. The next one is going to be for John. John, again, I really want to touch on how you are a full-time ophthalmologist, but really, how did this idea of Equinox start? I know it's a very unique story when you were diving and you were thinking about and brainstorming, and then take us through really just the highlights of, okay, I have this idea. I think this is going to be, there's something there. How did you then formulate a team to put a real company together?
Yeah. So naivety is a strange asset. It's an asset because you can ask questions before your mind's been put in the box by too much knowledge and too much reading. And so this is kind of directed towards all those young residents or medical students or early career folks. Don't let what is taught to you as dogma dominate your thoughts. The only way that progress occurs is by challenging conventional thinking. And so my story went like this. I was a first year resident at Duke. My wife and I got our 1 week of vacation, and we were in the Caribbean and doing a scuba dive. And I was down 30 feet thinking back to my scuba diving lessons that at 30 feet you had 1 atmosphere of pressure to your body and to your eye, and that's 760 millimeters of mercury when you're 30 feet underneath. And I thought, how is it possible that we could add that much pressure to the eyeball and people don't go blind? So instead of enjoying my dive or a Corona on the beach afterwards, I was kind of like a dog with a bone on this idea, and it came to help me believe that the absolute pressure inside the eyeball probably isn't what matters, because if you're in Denver, there's less atmospheric weight pushing on you and the absolute pressure in your eyeball is different. Or if you're scuba diving, your absolute pressure is way higher. It's pressure differentials that matter because that's what cause net forces to be generated. And so the disease of glaucoma happens at the optic nerve head when we lose retinal ganglion cells. What's the pressurized fluid on the other side of the optic nerve head? It's cerebral spinal fluid. And we know that cerebral spinal fluid affects the optic nerve because we see it all the time in idiopathic intracranial hypertension and papilledema when the optic nerve bows forward. And glaucoma, perhaps is just the opposite of that. An elevated intracranial or an elevated intraocular pressure or a low intracranial pressure. And that started to explain so many things like, why does normal tension glaucoma exist? Well, the eye pressure is normal, but the cerebral spinal fluid pressure is really low. Why do most people that have ocular hypertension, high eye pressure, but no glaucoma, not get it? Well, because they've got an elevated and protective CSF pressure. And so I brought those ideas back as a resident, and my attendings were gracious. They said, we think you're wrong, but you should study it. We studied it at Mayo Clinic and found out that it turns out that that's true. And now, 10 years later, there's 400 different citations, to this paper with, to my knowledge, all but one of them demonstrating that it's accurate. And so I guess when you have an idea, do something about it.
So that was a really good overview for you starting entrepreneurs of John, who basically had an idea and kind of worked in, put the company together and just kind of didn't give up and kept asking the right questions. And I think another thing he noted was really, really significant was, when you're starting out, it's easy to give up and, talk yourself out of it. And I think if you have too much knowledge, you'll probably, what they call analysis is paralysis. Would you agree with that, John?
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And so now we've got kind of this fundamental scientific, idea, right? That glaucoma maybe is a 2-pressure or a 3-pressure disease, a balance between eye pressure, cerebral spinal fluid pressure, and maybe ocular perfusion pressure. But then how do you turn that into something that actually helps people? So I go on to fellowship and with Tom Samuelson and Dick Lindstrom, and I remember this so vividly. I sat down with Dick Lindstrom as my fellowship director, and I'm nervous because I'm presenting to the king. And like he does with so many people, he just brings out so much good in every situation. So I presented this idea about CSF pressure and eye pressure in glaucoma. And he said, John, I think you're right. What are you going to do about it? And I kind of had this moment where I thought, I don't know. I guess people are going to think that I'm smart because we helped figure this out, if it turns out to be true. And he said, well, that's okay, but I'd like to try and actually use these discoveries to help people. And even if you don't have an idea now, opportunity will favor the prepared mind. And so fast forward 4 years, I still hadn't had a good idea about what to do about this. And I was reading an article about how astronauts are losing vision on the International Space Station because they're getting papilledema. And I thought, well, that's because there's no gravity in space. Cerebral spinal fluid and all the fluids in the body go toward the head. And now CSF pressure is higher than IOP, and maybe that's pushing the optic nerve forward. So I reached out to NASA, and that led me to think, if we could put a pair of goggles on the eye, pressurize them, raise the eye pressure to balance the cerebral spinal fluid pressure, maybe we can help these astronauts. Which then led to saying, well, why couldn't we do the reverse? If we just lowered the pressure in the goggles, reduce the amount of atmospheric weight on the eye, even though the atmospheric weight is on the rest of the body, we can dial in and lower eye pressure. So I cobbled together some stuff off Amazon, and we tested this in cadaver eyes and then ultimately in humans and showed that, it's just basic physics. We can do it. And that was enough to get some people to believe enough to put some of their own money in, kind of what's called the friends, family, and fools round. They may not understand the science, but they believed in me enough to give us some of their hard-earned money to chase this dream. And you take the next step and you set a milestone and you prove it, and then you start to get real money from professional investors. And that's when you absolutely have to put a team around you, like Matt and the rest of the Equinox team. And honestly, Ehsan, for me, that's the most motivating part, or the risk of failure part. I don't want to lose anybody's money. That's really important to me. I don't want to look stupid either, and but that's the least important part. The most important part is that Matt Larson and Gary Berman and Paul Yu and the whole Equinox team, they're dedicating years, the best years of their life, to chasing this idea. And so we want to pursue it hard and see if we can turn it into something that's real.
That's great. Matt, so you met John, and here you are, you saw this opportunity. Tell me, when you came in, what was the state of the company, and where are you now? And tell us a little bit about the funding state and sort of who's backing you up and the board and all that stuff. Give us a little insight, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I don't remember when I first talked to John about the idea, but I do remember seeing him present it for one of the first times, at least that I'd seen it. It was at an Oscars meeting in Australia. It's a really small, intimate meeting that's made up mostly of people from Australia and New Zealand. And he said it in a way that made me understand it, and I got it, and I thought it was really interesting and innovative. And then he actually got a nice compliment from one of the doctors who said, in all the meetings that I go to in the past decade or so, this has been one of the things that's really rang the truest for me. So that solidified it in my mind that, okay, somebody smarter than me is validating this idea and saying it's as interesting as I think it is. So I started to kind of track it from afar at that point. And then when the opportunity came and he started to build out the team, I was one of the first people to talk to him about it, and I wanted to join, and he thought it might be a good idea, and so we kind of partnered up from there. And in terms of where we are today, since I've joined about 2.5 years ago, we've built out a small team. We are moving as fast as we can. We actually finished our pivotal FDA trial just recently and are preparing our package to submit to the FDA. So we've really taken it from John's idea to a reality and completed a study, and we're working hard to make sure that we can help glaucoma patients in a new and different way. And like many glaucoma treatments, this can be used with other treatments as well. So we're excited about it, and we think it's going to be a really nice tool for the glaucoma surgeon.
So when this can be, I'm going to pivot to John. John, so you had the friends and family round. You brought your team together, your board. You had your mentors. You were asking all the right questions. And when you sat down and said this thing, there's something here, and you went to the next round of investments. How was that different? Did you need to have a lot of data behind you? If you're talking to a young guy who doesn't have that, what was that hurdle like? Can you give me some nuances there?
I think that new entrepreneurs always underestimate the challenge of raising money. As doctors, we're kind of used to people, patients saying, hey, whatever you say is what I'm going to do. And that's not necessarily the way the world works when it comes to fundraising. And so raising money is a challenge. And the way that I like to put it is, competency is punished. And what I mean by that is that every goal you accomplish or every problem you solve, the next problem that you're going to face is going to be bigger, right? So the first problem for us was, is CSF pressure and IOP, the CSF pressure matter in glaucoma? Okay, we do a study and we solve that. Or see that that's true. Okay, now can we change pressure with goggles? Okay, we showed that in a few patients. Now we've got proof of concept. Now the bigger problem is, how do we design a big study? How do we measure pressure with the goggles on? Okay, we got that figured out. All right, how are we going to commercialize this product? How are we going to get insurers to pay for it? Which patients are actually going to benefit? How do we demonstrate that benefit? So I think that most entrepreneurs, me included, if we knew how tall the mountain was, we may never start the journey. But because it's incremental and you solve it milestone by milestone, you can make progress. And so it's hard and it's no joke, and you absolutely have to have people around you that can help execute the idea. Remember, the idea is, maybe 1% of it, of the whole thing. The remaining 99% is real work. And it's fun work, it's gratifying work, but make no mistake, it's work. And so you need to have a dedicated team around you and treat them well, treat them right, and have everybody rowing in the same direction.
That's terrific. So, Matt, tell me a little bit about where are you now with the current stage of development? I know you're looking at normal tension, and maybe some to the liberty you can talk about what you're looking at. You're comfortable. Can you share with the audience where the current stage of the development of the company is, and then also, what's the next few quarters, few years look like for the company?
Well, we think, as we looked at the glaucoma market, we wanted to fit in where there's a true unmet need. And there's been a lot of innovation in glaucoma, and it's all been amazing, but most of it has been for the mild to moderate glaucoma patient. And so we know there's also a big piece of that market that's still having issues. And John would say those are the patients he's still worried about. And those are the severe patients and the normal tension glaucoma patients. And because this is based on physics, we know we can help those patients. And so we think that's the market where we're going to make the biggest dent. And right now we're working on getting our FDA approval. We've finished that study and preparing the package for the FDA. We don't know when clearance will happen, but we have some pretty strong data to send to the FDA. And we think that with the safety profile of this device, we think that the FDA will look at it in a positive light and see the strong data that we have, and hopefully we can get clearance. For the next couple of quarters, that's what we'll be doing, sending off that package pretty soon and then waiting for feedback, questions back and forth, etc. At the same time, we'll be doing some other studies to look at specifically the normal tension glaucoma population. And so we'll be doing some studies only on those patients because we believe that's where this is going to be the best fit for this device.
I got to tell you, as a fellow glaucoma aficionado like John, I got to tell you that this is going to be a huge game changer for a lot of patients. Especially post-COVID, people are having difficulty coming in. I think there's going to be a lot of value at provide treatments, and we've seen things like Bimatoprost SR, what Durista now. These implants are going in because there's so much data behind patients not taking their drops. So as a doctor, I'm really excited about that, and just really providing better care and just less morbidity around the eye drops and cost and all the other stuff. John, what do you think about that? I mean, we kind of didn't really talk about the sort of deep dive why this matters, but do you feel like there's a lot of traction for that for clinicians?
Yeah, and when we talk to clinicians, that's what we hear repeatedly. As Matt talks about normal tension glaucoma and severe glaucoma, those are the patients that, if somebody comes in and their pressure is 25 and they've got mild glaucoma, we know that we've got a lot of tools to solve the problem for them currently. But if someone presents for the first time and their pressure is 14 and their glaucoma is getting worse, you're looking at, MIGS probably isn't going to lower the pressure that much. Drops probably aren't going to lower the pressure that much. A trab, a tube, a Zen might, they come with real morbidity. And so when you have a device that's additive to anything that's already been done, and in addition, it's safe, we think that there's a lot of the most vulnerable people out there, the most vulnerable patients with the worst glaucoma, that we can actually help. And, primum non nocere, safety first, first do no harm. We think that that's really an important concept for these patients that are holding on with aggressive and progressive glaucoma.
That's really good. I got to tell you, I'm really excited about that, John. Matt, I want to go back to you a little bit. I know as much as you're comfortable. What was your last round like raising money for people who are like, okay, now past the first phase of friends and family? Who's your biggest capital partners? Are you talking to daily? Do you have to what does that look like as far as managing expectations? We like to talk about that a little bit as well. When you get an investor, how does that relationship, change the chemistry of the company and the board?
Yeah, we have some of the best investors you can have in anything, but especially in ophthalmology. Flying L Partners and Visionary Ventures and Blue Stem are the leads on our project, and we're really excited to have them. And they comprise the board as well. We've got Andy Corley as the chairman, Dick Lindstrom and Bill Link from Flying L Partners as well. Jeff Weinhuff from Visionary Ventures are on the board, and Tyler Stowwater from Blue Stem Capital. And really, if you think about investing in ophthalmology, you couldn't ask for better partners than that. They know the landscape. They are seeing most of the opportunities that are coming through ophthalmology. And so having them really validates the project, and they're amazing advisors. So John and I and the team get to pick their brains and brainstorm together with them and use their experience to help guide the project.
Terrific. And then, so this, we always end with your sort of passing the baton. Both John and Matt are really seasoned entrepreneurs. And so if I'm a young entrepreneur starting out, I'm intimidated, I don't have any funding, but I might have a really phenomenal idea that will help patients and add value to the marketplace. John, tell me, what are some 3 or 4 things that you would pass on? And number 2, probably more important than number 1, how is John Berdahl different? Who is the new John Berdahl, the sort of as evolved versus the one that was just had an idea?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing I would do is say, is my idea so embedded in me that I have to do something about it? Because like we talked about, the mountain of entrepreneurship is steep and long. And so if you wake up repeated days and the first thing on your mind is this idea, it's an itch you have to scratch, then go for it. So it has to be something that you can't give up on. Number 2 is then do some intellectual property work. Get a either a patent search done, or if you know how to do it, do a patent search and determine if there's a market for this. Is it really solving an unmet need? And one thing that doctors don't think about that much is how and who is going to pay for it. And so that's next. Then the third is, once you've got a sense of the intellectual property, get a couple of close mentors and people that have done it before, people that you can trust, and say, am I making some good, prudent decisions here early on? Because I don't think that you can do it without trusting other people, and you just hold your idea so close that it never has a chance to blossom. You need to involve other people. And then those other people are going to help you figure out how to get it funded, how to design the work that you need to do. And that's the first step. And I'd encourage you to do it. Go for it, right? We get one life, we get one swing at this. And the only thing that ever makes a difference in life is when some individual takes a risk and says, I'm willing to be wrong and I'm willing to fail, but I'm going to go for it because I only get one shot at this life. How have I changed over the last 10 years? I'm probably a little more pragmatic and I'm curious by nature. Actually, Gene DeWan gave me this piece of advice. He said, John, I'm interested in about everything, but I have to stay really disciplined to be both, to spend my time on things that are both interesting and important. And so I would say that 10 years ago, I chased things just just for the sake of curiosity 10 years ago. And now I chase things that are both interesting and important. And that's probably the biggest change for me personally.
That's terrific. For those of you listening, write notes down. This is really good stuff. Matt, tell us your journey. How's the new improved Matt versus 10 years ago, other than the kids and the family and all that? And managing all the family stuff. How are you different? What are some of the things you would like to teach a young COO and a president of a company? And just, what are some things that I think will be effective in things you've done?
Well, I don't know if I'm much different from 10 years ago. I mean, we all learn from our experiences and we all have opportunities. And I feel like I've been blessed and had really good luck with the opportunities that I've had. When I think about, a situation or a project, the first thing I always think about is the people, whether it be your mentors or the people that you work with. And, when you're thinking about joining a new company or a new project, you want to pay attention to what kind of people they are, what the culture is, and does that match with your belief set, and do you bring skills that can help that? I always try to be open to new learning opportunities and continuously learn. We can get better every day. And if we take a new challenge on to get new skills or take on a new project, I think that can only help us grow. And one thing that I remember someone teaching me early on was to steal shamelessly. Now that sounds bad, but what it really means is, if you've got a boss or a coworker who does something really well, don't be afraid to just take that and use it for yourself. If they explain something really well, take some of the words they're using, or if they do something really well, emulate that behavior. And when we think about the business side, I always thinking about the customer first. We want to listen to the customer. If we're making a new device or have a new drug or whatever it is, you got to listen to the data and what the customer is telling you, because we can all convince each other in a room that this is the best thing ever. But if the customer's not saying the same thing, then those things don't match up. And so those are the things I try to think about when I go in a project and move forward on a project.
That's terrific. I want to say thank you both for coming by today with your busy schedules with the family and the craziness of Corona. I wish you and the family safe and just a wonderful, successful year. And it was just truly a pleasure to have you both on.
Ehsan and team, hey, thanks for including us. And Ehsan, thanks for the really kind words. They mean a lot. And we're excited about what we got going. We think we got a shot.
Ehsan, thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. Equinox is excited to be a part of the OIS podcast. And hopefully next time we can do it in person and not at each other's or at our own homes.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe for upcoming episodes with the movers and shakers in ophthalmology. Also, take note of the new format and content in our OIS weekly newsletter.